Welcome back to Inside City Hall. Mayor Bloomberg's fight to change the layoff law for teachers now faces a major roadblock since Governor Cuomo presented his own plan to evaluate educators. So how should the mayor proceed now that his proposed legislation seems stalled? Joining us to discuss that issue and more are the four members of our Consultants Corner. We have Republicans Tom Doherty and Robert Hornak, and Democrats L. Williams and Jeff Pollock. Good evening to all of you.
Good evening.
Let's jump right in and grade Governor Cuomo on his intervention. It's not clear what he's up to or why or how it's all going to turn out, but he certainly did change the conversation. What do you think, Tom?
Well, I think that the thing that we should look at is clearly, personally, I don't think that his intervention went far enough. I clearly think that we have a problem and we need to figure out a way that the really good teachers, the vast majority of the really good teachers, don't constantly feel this is an attack on them. In fact, I would like to see us pay good teachers more money. But we have bad teachers, and there should be some civilized, decent way that we can deal with it. I think the problem that he initially ran into was, on the day where the Senate passed it, Bloomberg's in Albany, he kind of just said no, jumped on it, pounced on the mayor, and so the relationship took a little beating. But I will say this, is that, the governor gets a lot of credit because what normally happens in Albany is that the Assembly says one thing, the Senate Republicans say another thing, and then the issue just goes away. And he clearly has found a way, recognizing there is a problem, that we can't have this just seniority-based system continue, that, I think over the next month or two we'll have real dialogue and get the ball moving forward, which in Albany never happens. People come with good ideas,
Sure.
They disagree, and it's done and over with. And I think for that reason, he gets a lot of credit for that.
And he gets from you what grade?
I give him a B for that reason,
Okay.
is that I'd like to have
Okay.
seen it
Very
be
good.
more stringent, but he kept it something.
He kept the ball in
He kept
play.
the ball in play, and that in Albany today is very important.
Spoken like an Albany veteran, absolutely. L. Williams, what grade do you give the governor?
I give him an A. I agree on some of the points there. He definitely takes the conversation, make sure it stays in play, but then he also takes it to the executive level by saying let's evaluate teachers on the state level and sort of not just address this issue on a city base, being on city base. So I give him an A for that.
Okay, very good. And Robert Hornak?
I give him a B-. And I agree with a lot of what's been said. It's very good that he added his voice to this dialogue. It's a very important role that he plays in this whole process. He needs to take the lead on this. The reason I gave him the minus was because he has defaulted to the unions, like he has done on so many other critical issues so far. It's very good that he wants to reform last in, first out. But the fact that he is giving essentially the unions a veto on any objective criteria that could be used to judge teachers really calls into question, in my opinion, how forthright he's being about really wanting to reform this.
Is it a veto by the unions or by the Assembly Speaker, who in fact can kill the legislation?
Sure, but if his proposal was taken at face value, what he called for was a reform of last in, first out, but only establishing criteria that were acceptable to the unions. In other words, it would have to go through the collective bargaining process in order to establish those criteria by which the teachers are judged. And to me, that's like giving, AIG a seat at the table on reforming insurance. You just don't do that. You have to establish objective criteria that are actually objective.
That's outrageous to compare sort of the notion of people who are participating in the process to AIG that was inherently trying to crush the process that was going on. And Robert must be the only person who thinks that the unions have a seat on the table, because they've been clearly very angered by what's been going on. What I do think is that the governor handled this deftly in terms of taking the issue on to himself. What was happening was the mayor was getting the credit, the push. The mayor deserved the credit. He was doing everything to push this thing, and the governor stepped in, and I think he did so rather adeptly. The way that I take that view is, look, if you look at the New York Times this morning, anytime the New York Times sides with somebody other than Mike Bloomberg, I know they're doing something right, because the New York Times does not like to disagree with Mayor Mike. The mayor has done such a great job, and the New York Times has acknowledged that. But this morning's paper, very clearly, the Times says that the governor has to lead and has a lot of right points. So look, I think the governor did it right. I gave him an A- only because I actually think the rhetoric with the mayor that happened in those first 24, 48 hours was too heated. It was all too passionate, frankly, on both sides. And seemingly that's died down, which I think is a very good thing.
Okay, all of that averages out to a pretty good grade, what that we'd all be happy
It
with.
averages out to a B.
Yeah, well,
There you go.
Okay. Let's get a quick round of response. This is the governor. He was asked a question today about overall budget politics, and he had a sort of a witty response. So think of him as your client, and we'll get your feedback. Let's listen.
Are you going to be tough?
What, do they think I'm a softie?
Well, no, but I mean,
You think I'm a softie? I am going to do what I told the people of the state of New York I was going to do. I ran for office. I was all over this state. I was very explicit in what I said I would do. I laid out a full agenda. I did books on the agenda. People made fun of the books. That's okay. I was very clear with what I was going to do. I said I was going to bring ethics to Albany, bring integrity to Albany. I was going to balance the budget. I was not going to raise taxes. And I'm going to do exactly what I said I was going to do.
All right, so that was in Rochester. He was asked if he's tough enough to take the blowback and get through with these tough budget cuts he's asking for. Imagine him as your client. Is that how you want your client to position himself?
Yeah, I think he came off very well. I mean, look, he's very quick on his feet, and he always has been, and he has an ability to be very, very charming when he's speaking. And that's one of the things that has served him very, very well. He's an excellent communicator, and I think he does quite effectively there.
And at the end of the day, he's a New Yorker. So to respond when you think I'm soft, I mean, that comes across, and many of New Yorkers can identify with that response.
Yeah, talking to me?
Certainly nobody's going to mistake Andrew Cuomo for a softie. There's no question about that. Yeah. And I think he's actually played a very, very important role in this whole process. He has really taken the lead in calling for a lot of major reforms. The follow-through, though, is something that we haven't seen yet. Like I said earlier, he has on almost all of these issues given the unions a major bargaining position at the table, which could go one of two ways. Either they could actually put some really good proposals on the table, and the governor could accept those proposals, or they could hamstring the process, and the governor could either have to go a separate way and show some real strength and independence, or he will cave to the unions, in which case that'll pretty much be the end of his governorship.
Interesting. Look, let's talk about the.
I don't know. I think the way things are going. I think the re-elect is starting already. I mean, quite frankly, I don't know how you could ask to get off to a much better start. I mean, even Republicans who were very, very skeptical have signed on because of his fiscal agenda. He has shown himself, without being his cheerleader, has surrounded himself with a very professional team. They have clearly said, we are taking this very seriously. And as he said, I'm going to go in there, fix the budget. I'm going to bring ethics to Albany. And that's a short-term thing right now, but the right message. And I'm not raising taxes. And I'm going to, portray this image of this really matters. This stuff is important that we're doing. And so as I sit here, if I was his political advisor, I would say, you really don't need me. You're doing a pretty good job on your own right now. And I said this during the election. I said, we will learn very early on if the years of him watching the good, the bad, the train wrecks of Albany, is he able to say, I've learned? And I think what I've seen in 3 months is he's learned what works in Albany. And let's just hope that it continues for 3+ more years.
We shall see. Let me ask about Peter King, the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, is starting hearings that have already drawn rallies and a lot of opposition, a lot of concern. Let's talk about it in terms of pure politics. Is this a winner for Republicans in the run-up to the 2012 elections? Is this how they want to be seen? As
I don't understand how they want to be seen. I think that either you're in support of what America is trying to do and defend itself, or the people who stand up as if Republicans think that all Muslims are bad is utterly ridiculous. I think that the one thing that my Republican friends, at least, and I think that just people who care about our country would say is, there is bad elements of all society, okay? And that as Americans, we fight bad elements, whether they're the IRA in Ireland, whether they're radical Jewish organizations in Israel. We speak out against those. So why is it so bad as Americans that we say and request that our fellow Muslims in this country speak out and be heard when 99% of all Muslims are phenomenal people?
Because we don't have congressional. I agree with everything you said, Tom.
We're not under attack by the IRA's not bombing us.
But we don't have congressional hearings on the radical elements of of the vast left-wing Jewish conspiracy, right? I mean, it's just
They're not looking to bomb the World Trade Center. I mean,
but-
Jeff, there's
but
a little bit
neither-
of difference.
but
They want to kill us. They
no-
want us dead.
But that's the
there's
problem,
no
is the
reason
rhetoric.
there's no reason for these hearings, Tom. You know it. There's no reason to have a congressional hearing about this. A discussion, yes, but this is pure politics that Peter King is playing, and it's wrong.
And it'll continue to fuel the bias that people will have against Muslim Americans here in America, and will not create the trust that's needed to help thwart some of these activities on our homeland. I mean, after the report that was released last month, it said, out of the thwarted attacks, 128 of them, I think, about 43 were tips from Muslim Americans. And the more we build relationships with Muslim Americans in our country, we'll be able to thwart attacks like that. These hearings do nothing to support that action.
And many of the Muslims that you are talking about are actually being called to testify at these hearings. Here's the problem. And my libertarian nature is screaming at me that this is very much a religious freedom issue. But you have to divorce this from the politics, and you have to step back for a second and look at what's going on here. There is not a there's not a moderate Muslim blowback to what's going on with the radical Muslim extremist agenda. Where are the leaders in the Muslim community stepping forward and saying, we are going to set the tone for the opposition within the Muslim community? That voice does not exist, and that's the problem here. And the other big problem is, this is a hearing. This is an open forum where everybody is being called to testify. Why suddenly all of this knee-jerk reaction from the left? Why not let the hearings take their course and see where this leads us?
Because, Robert, it's an absolutely pure political thing. It's an absolute follow-up to the ridiculousness of the mosque craziness that we went through with Ground Zero, where all it was silly rhetoric that went on, and the congressman unfortunately sees this as a nice political extension of that, where there was plenty of play for him. It's just wrong. It's not necessary. It shouldn't be happening. It certainly shouldn't be happening in this country.
And it's
wrong.
not an effective way to thwart terrorism in our country.
That's going to be the last word. Thanks so much. Of course, we're at the beginning of that discussion, and the hearings will be taking place later this week. Thanks so much for coming in. Good to see you, Tom. Good to see you, Robert.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in, Jeff L. Joy Williams. Your first time on the show. I hope
Thank
it won't
you,
be the
Phil.
last.
Great.
It's time for a break, folks. I'm going to be back in just a minute with a preview of tomorrow night's program. Stay with us.